the basis or the measurement for me is love.
Is
That's
that
it for me.
because you choose love to be your guiding principle, or do you think that there's some overarching objective?
I went to China to offer to them and did do that.
Mm,
Salvation. Because you can't do Christianity in China. I
mm,
got followed, my phones got tapped. We're
mm.
so used to doing Christianity that when you don't have it to do, what do you do?
So it's sort of like what some people experienced during COVID, where they
Yes.
weren't doing the church things.
Yes. My first experience of culture shock was back here in the States.
Wow.
I didn't have culture shock going to China.
Mm,
But coming back to the States and standing in church, I hadn't even sought to hear it.
yes.
It just did not exist. And that cultural shock experience is what pushed me to go back and start
Mm,
asking questions. I don't
mm.
want my experience of this idea of God to be limited to Christianity's idea.
What did you do with your views of the afterlife, heaven, hell?
Great.
Once
Such great question. Mhm.
you told me to remember that there were others who've gone before me. But see, the reason why that didn't really, I wasn't quick to say, oh yeah, let me, kind of get on the coattails of the movement that's already, because all right, this is the Ichabod podcast, and you are, Chandrika, you are going to be a first of many women that I've invited onto the show. I've had several guests, and people keep saying, are you ever going to have any women on to talk about these issues? And I said, yes, I have some great women lined up, and you are the first of the great women lined up. So,
Come on, history. And I thought the same thing and just thought I'm going to be quiet and listen and learn from whoever's on
you're gonna
here.
take Paul's instruction, huh?
Listen, and then you reached out. I was like, well, sure. But I did think, I wonder if he'll ever have any women on.
Hmm. Nah, that's what's up.
Especially on the conversation of abortion. I was really trying to chime in on that last
Oh yeah.
conversation.
Well, see, the line that wasn't my show,
I
and
know.
you can see when that conversation came up, I quickly shut up. I wanted
Yes,
Shannon Q to man that ship. I always hate
yes.
when I hear conversations about abortion and it's male voices in the
Hmm.
conversation.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. But for those who don't know, my guest today is Chandrika Phea.
Hmm.
I'm curious, do you say what the D stands for since you put it in the
I don't say that. That's
Oh,
for people who are in
oh,
friendship.
you
But
should have
that's
changed your name. You should have just said Chandrika Phea. Then I wouldn't have even asked
but
about it.
that's what's on my book, though. My
Oh,
books
okay.
is includes
Okay.
my middle initial.
So the revealed things belong to us, the hidden things belong to you.
to me and those who know me very well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chandrika. You are a author and a well, tell us about you. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm from Oklahoma City. I am the daughter of pastors,
Hmm.
Christian pastors, Pentecostal pastors,
Hmm.
granddaughter of the same, um, the niece of the same in
So you
many
come from a
cases.
long line of ministers.
Long
Okay.
line of ministers, singers, musicians, um, clergy is it just runs through the family on both
Mm.
sides,
Okay. Wow.
mom and dad. More on my mom's side than my dad, but both my mom and dad.
Okay.
I am the oldest of four girls.
Mm.
We're from Oklahoma City, where my parents and my sisters still reside. I moved to Columbus and finished my degree here with a degree in biblical studies. Had an opportunity to go live in China for 2 years. I
Mm.
went there to change China, and
Change
China
China in
changed
what
me.
way?
I went to get everybody saved.
Oh, okay.
What you mean?
So
I went to evangelize the whole country.
so you were a missionary to China.
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
Disguised as a teacher.
Gotcha. Yep. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
And that, China changed me instead.
Mm.
So, not to say that I wasn't impactful, but I never
Hmm.
went there to to be as impacted as I was.
Got you. Got you.
I'm a best-selling author,
Okay.
award-winning as well.
So the name
Got,
of your book is actually going to be the name of this show. I'm going
oh,
to title it, yeah, Lord, Don't Let Me Die a Christian. And
actually, it's
so,
Lord, I don't want to die a
oh, Lord,
Christian.
I don't want to die a Christian.
But
Okay.
you have to know how often people
Mm.
say that. I'm like, is that projection? Because I didn't say that, but so many
Well, no.
people. They,
So I'll get into the psychology of why I mixed it up,
okay,
because Lord, don't let me die a Christian sounds more like a prayer.
hmm,
Lord, I don't want to die a Christian seems more like a complaint, maybe, or I'm not
okay,
sure, just a exclamation. And
hmm,
I think it's just more natural to start a sentence with Lord and assume it's a prayer. And so I just probably put it in prayer form.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
I understand that. I understand that. No one has ever explained why it's there. But still, I do wonder though:
Hmm.
is it their prayer? You know, is it their
Mm.
prayer? And my book has
Hmm.
given them permission to say it out loud.
But coming from your lips, it wasn't a prayer.
No, I
It,
wouldn't. I don't know that it was a complaint either.
mhm.
However, it fits the scenario. And
Okay.
I'll let you. I'll share if you
Well, you
want me to.
break down this. So a missionary to China.
Yes.
Well, hold on. Let's get a little bit more into your. This is so sad that we have to do this, but because there are people who are going to want to know, how do we know you were ever really saved, or why do you even think you were saved in the first place? You kind of have
Okay.
to flash your badge to show you were in before somebody accepts that you're now out because you left the Christian faith. True.
I would say that I have evolved out of it.
Ah,
And I
evolved out
and
of
I
it.
think and I think that, but the evolution is ever, it's
Evolving.
a process. Yeah, the
Got you.
evolution is ever evolving. So I'm still, you know, I think it'll last forever. I shouldn't say
Mm,
forever, for the rest of my life. I wrote that. Like,
mm,
I was in it for so long, I
yeah.
don't feel like I could just give it up. It's just gone. But
So
I'm always approaching
yeah,
issues of life and revisiting what
yeah.
are my beliefs about those issues as I am
So
approached.
my deconversion video was titled "Unbecoming a Christian,"
Yes.
and it seems like what you're saying is you don't know if you're ever really unbecome. There's a in life we are becoming, and
Yes.
now even if you're unbecoming, it's going to be this ongoing process because of
Yes.
how deep into your DNA it
Yes.
was.
Yes.
Like you said,
How
coming from a
deep,
long
how
line of ministers.
Yes, how
Yeah.
deep, and I wouldn't say it was in my DNA, because I don't need anybody borrowing that.
Mm,
I think, but I was so cultured
hmm.
that
Yeah.
that as we continue to live, there are going to be um parts and processes and experiences of society that I'm going to be confronted with,
Yeah.
and I'm going to have to ask myself again,
Yeah.
what do I believe about that? And I'm having to ask myself, because Christianity already taught me what to believe
Yep.
about many different things.
That's what
So I'm
culture
gonna
does. It gives you your
right.
answers to life's
T-
questions. And
yes.
even when you
So
start questioning those answers, they're still there.
yes. So it for me, it is gonna be. I'm gonna always be asking,
Hmm.
and for me, the basis or the measurement for me is love. How do I see this, through the eyes or through the experience of
Hmm.
love, or through the
Hmm.
desire to love?
Is
That's
that
it for me.
because you choose love to be your guiding principle, or do you think that there's some overarching objective love should be, love must be, was designed to be your overarching principle? Why are you centering everything on love?
Because I feel like I don't have any questions about that.
Wow, good
I don't
answer.
I don't have any questions about love. I got a lot of questions about what Christianity taught me.
Hmm.
But I don't have any questions about love. I don't have any questions about my experience of it. I
Hmm.
don't have my questions about how I have any questions about how I have expressed love,
Hmm.
how my expression of love has changed or helped someone else.
We're going to come back to this. I got to write this question now because I don't want to forget it.
Okay.
We'll come back to this question of love in a little bit. So let's do this. Let's flash your card for those who are going to say, If you're saying you're out, you must have never been in. How do you know, or why do you think you were a Christian in the first place?
That's a great question.
Mm.
I was a Christian because I was told I was born into it. I mean, my parents claim Christianity,
Mm.
and I write that um, I was born a Christian. I was just as much born a Christian as someone else was born a Hindu. I was
So,
just
so you're talking about culture, and you said that a minute ago was culture.
yes.
So I have two minds now,
Hmm.
and I'm going to try to merge these two minds into one, even though they conflict. Um, there's the mind in me, the old Christian in me, that would have heard, and I know you're not done yet. I cut you off, so you're going to,
Hmm.
continue, but would have heard you say you were born a Christian. I would have automatically began loading up the clips in my arsenal of, you can only mean that in a cultural sense. You can never mean that in the salvific sense, because you must be born again. So there are people who are going to be watching this and say, "Oh, if she thinks she was born a Christian, that explains why she could leave, because she never really was. She was only
Right.
a cultural Christian, not a born again, salvifically, transferred from the kingdom
Well,
of darkness into light, that kind of thing."
right. But the reason I was salvifically, I love the word. I
Mhm.
learned a lot of new words from you. The reason I went through that process is because culture told me I should have.
Wow. I love it. Please pay attention if you're watching. Listen to what Chandrika is saying now, because
Yes.
you heard what I just tried to do to kind of to put that check in there. But it's so important what she just said. The culture is what told her that she needed to undergo this, the spiritual thing that you wanted her to say when I asked the
Yes.
question. Please
Yes.
go on.
I was told, that I was born in sin,
Mm,
shaped in iniquity. My nobody that I
mm,
know of preached hell like my father.
mm,
Nobody. So, I was fed this what Christianity says is truth.
yeah.
And if I wanted to not go to hell, if I
Hmm.
wanted to not go to heaven, then yes, I went through the salvation
Hmm.
process
Did
as
you
Christianity has given it to
Right.
us.
So as they're spoon feeding you this
Hmm.
understanding of, here's why you do wrong,
Hmm.
here's why you're wrong, puts you on God's bad side, here's how you get on his good side. Um, you accepted it, but I guess the people, forgive me for pandering to this, but I just think it's part of the world we live in. The people who still want to put a magnifying glass up to your salvation, they're going to want to know, okay, you accepted it because it was fed to you. Did you ever embrace this notion that, yes, you are a sinner and you needed a savior and Jesus was it? Like, did it ever become yours and not just something the culture made you used to?
I want to find an example.
Hmm.
Culture said, help me if I'm wrong. Culture says I'm black,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I am black. I am black. I,
Hmm.
I embrace that fully, but I didn't come into the world as a
Hmm.
baby knowing I'm black.
Gotcha.
I didn't come into the world like that. I was identified as a black woman,
Hmm.
and then the culture of what is black
Hmm.
or African American became
Hmm.
my culture
Hmm.
as I was born into it.
Hmm.
And so yes, I embraced and believed that I needed salvation
Hmm.
um, to go to heaven. I mean, I preached it. I'm
Hmm.
ordained, all of those things.
Hmm.
I preached it. Right out to the side of me, I have so many Bibles, and I mean, I don't even know if they're all right there.
Hmm.
I carried my Bible everywhere I went.
Hmm.
So I went to China to offer to them, and did do that
Hmm.
salvation,
Hmm.
because that's all I had to offer. When they
Hmm.
when they said to me, you just are so happy. What is it? What are you so happy about? Well, I offered what Christianity told me to offer.
Hmm.
I offered salvation because that's why I was happy.
Hmm. Wow.
I didn't know it had anything to do with biology or personality or nothing. I was happy because I was saved by
Hmm.
his power divine.
Mm,
I'm saved with true life. So my, you know, life now is
mm,
sweet and my
mm.
joy is complete. For I'm saved. That's
Saved,
all I
saved,
knew.
saved. Okay.
Saved,
Yeah.
saved. So I gave them what I knew, what had been
Mm,
given to me.
mhm, mm. Yeah. Uh, Once again, I'm only doing this because I know I'm not going to call them haters, but there are people who, like I would have been before I left the faith, I would have
Hmm.
been scanning your testimony for reasons to discount it.
Hmm.
And so the things that we're going to get into won't even land for some people until we can cover some of these areas. And I think this is the service that I want to provide. So
Okay.
forgive me for vexing you with these kinds of questions, but this is helping very many people just to be able to say, okay, if I can't discount her experience, then maybe I need to pay attention to what she has to say on the other side of this. So
Okay.
yeah, forgive me for stressing this point. So you grow up in a Christian household, going to church weekly.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, did you ever have a salvation experience, a day where you said, I accepted this day, or was it just like you said, the air you breathe, like your blackness, just
No, and I think that's an interesting question because
mm,
as a pastor's kid,
mhm,
as a preacher's kid, we were already thrust into the front,
mm,
and so and I say that to say nowadays I have observed pastors and preachers' kids who have not done those things that we had to do.
mm,
When I was a kid, I had to. It didn't matter that my parents were pastors. It didn't matter I was a musician, a singer. It didn't matter. I still had to stand up in front of the church, go to the altar, and say, "Lord, I give my life to you. I
mm,
confess Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. That I'm a sinner." That I had to say all those
mm,
things. The same thing and what's funny is I don't think pastors' kids and preachers' kids have to do that as
mm,
much anymore.
mm. Yeah.
They get to play all the roles. They get to stand in the pulpit. They get to guide and lead services and have sermonettes and be
Mm,
musicians and sing, and they get to do all that. And we haven't seen them
mm,
stand before the church and do nothing.
mm.
Now all of a sudden it's a personal relationship. Now it's really a personal relationship.
Mm. So you had the profession of faith. Well, speak about that. Did you have a so did you have a personal relationship with God in your mind, and what was that like?
Not at the moment of receiving salvation. No,
Mhm.
I didn't.
But ever?
Um,
And how did that develop?
yes, yes, and I believe I still do. That's
Okay.
not, Christianity is to me is not, or religion is not uh, a, a representation of God or
Mm,
divinity,
mm,
or spirituality, even
mhm.
whichever you want to, um,
But as a Christian,
however
you
you want
wouldn't
to
have said
label it.
that. As a Christian, you would have said, correct me if I'm wrong, that your personal relationship with God was only via your Christianity.
I would say that I had a personal relationship with Christianity.
Ah, okay.
Hmm.
So, but I'm trying to get you to go back to your Christian days. Would you have said that then, or would you have said you had a
Would I have
personal
said
relationship
in
with
my
God?
Christian days that I had a relationship with Christianity? No, I
Right,
didn't know that I only had a relationship with Christianity until I didn't have Christianity
right.
anymore.
So yeah, so we're going to get there. I want to your personal relationship with God while you were a Christian. Can you speak to that? What was that like? Can you go back that far or
That's why I can't go back that far, and that's
okay.
what I'm saying.
Mm,
Now I can say
mm,
that looking back, I had more of a relationship with Christianity than I had with God, but maybe calling it a relationship with God.
okay.
But it was more a relationship with Christianity.
What did it look like? Was it was it frequent prayer? Was it spiritual experiences like being filled with the spirit? Like what because it might help someone to be able to identify with your experience because they may still be
Yes,
having it.
yes. Um, I had experiences, but still they were in my mind Christian experiences.
Right.
Um,
Well, if you can just revisit that, just can you explain what that was like for the person that may be able to maybe having those experiences now? I'm just trying to find common ground between you and any
Yes.
believer on the planet
You're good. You
at
don't have
that
to keep
time.
explaining it. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, I'm trying to figure out which experience. I mean, I
Mm,
should be specific about which experience I was having. Uh, my first introduction, I think, to love
mm,
from a spiritual standpoint, and I mean spiritual versus religion.
mm,
Um, I was still identifying myself as a Christian. As a matter of fact, um, the experience of love was not um it wasn't orchestrated by a church service.
mm,
No one was It was no one there but my first mentor at the time. There was nobody laying hands on me,
mm,
none of that. But I seemed to be overtaken, and I
mm,
literally was just kind of sitting there waiting for my first mentor
mm,
to be ready to go. And that I was overwhelmed by
mm,
what I deemed to be love. I didn't have no other. I had no other reference. I didn't
mm,
no other way to explain it. And still, when I look back to that experience as a Christian,
mm,
there's nothing. I
mm.
still don't have any other words for it.
Was
It
there?
was
Yeah.
love that was limitless and boundless,
Mm,
and I could not get myself together. I mean, I
mm,
cried for a good 45 minutes. I tried to get away from it. I write about this. I
mm,
tried to get away from it. Um, uh, and again, by this time, this is years after going through the salvation process. I tried to
mm,
get away from it, and it wouldn't
mm,
let me go. I left that place and started to correct all my wrongs. And I'm talking
mm.
about not
Did that
over a
happen
span
during
of
a church
days.
service or something, or like what was the setting?
The setting was in a church, but
Hmm.
there had been a rehearsal, and
Hmm.
the rehearsal was over, and I was just sitting in a different space by
Hmm.
myself, waiting on my first mentor to get up to get ready to go.
Music playing,
No,
no, no preaching.
no.
Were you?
My first mentor is an artist, a music
Mm,
artist, and they had a rehearsal,
mm,
um, and they dismissed the rehearsal. I mean, I was fine the whole time. I'm a musician, I'm a
right.
singer, so I'm listening to technique, and
Okay.
they prayed. And I think my job at that time was just to
Mm,
be observant,
mm,
to, make sure she didn't need something.
mm.
And so I was just sitting in my own section
Were you
in this,
contemplating on the words of the song, maybe, or anything like that?
um, what was the song? I don't remember what the song was.
Okay.
Um, I don't think so.
Okay.
Uh, I think there had been some conversation even between
Hmm.
me and, so there was nobody like tipping out like I'm getting ready to go. No,
Right.
we had dismissed, and
Mm,
we had talked and all of that. I was literally just sitting there waiting for her to be ready to go. She gonna be
and
ready to
then
go.
out of
You know,
nowhere, just this.
I literally describe it out of
Mm,
nowhere. I was overtaken, overwhelmed by it. Shocked her. I think it surprised her. She didn't know what was going on, and
mm.
I could
Wow.
not get myself together. It changed my life forever,
Wow.
forever.
Wow.
So I've had those spiritual, what I would say now
Hmm.
is spiritual experiences that um made me pursue integrity.
Mm,
It made me that night get in my car and call people and confess to them where I had been wrong, where I had done things wrong,
wow.
and fix it.
Hmm.
And from that point on, I began to pursue integrity,
Mm,
and truth and honesty, and it has evolved authenticity,
hmm.
over the years.
Okay. Wow. You say you're ordained as a minister,
I'm ordained as a reverend.
as a
That's what
reverend.
the Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, do you still make use of that ordination?
I do.
Okay.
When it's time to go see somebody at the hospital,
Hmm.
I park in the clergy parking lot,
Okay.
parking spots, so that I don't have to drive. So it's closer to the door. That's really almost the only time I remember.
Mhm.
But also I make use of it in these conversations because I
Mhm.
want people to know that you can we can have all of these things.
Mhm.
I have a degree in biblical studies. I have tons of ministry experiences and all of that, and still have questions.
Mhm.
You know,
Gotcha.
I don't. I'm kind of over us acting like everything we believe is absolute. You know,
Mhm.
I we chatted a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago. I texted you and said, "Hey, um, I saw this guy said he preached the name of his sermon was the reality of hell." Like, are you kidding me? Like and
Right.
you can't be
Like he's
um
been there.
right. You can't be a pastor and not believe in the power that you give words.
Mm.
So how am I supposed to take that? The
Mm.
reality of hell,
Mm.
it's like you selling me a restaurant you've never been to.
Mm. Wow.
You should really go. Okay, well, tell me what's on the menu that I should get. Well, actually, I haven't been, but
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
and so
Wow.
I'm exhausted of
Mhm.
the in the inauthentic, if that's the right word, the lack of authenticity that
Mhm.
comes with having to be Christian.
The dogmatism that comes with it.
I
Yeah.
and all of it is behind what you've never experienced.
Mm.
What I can talk about is what I've experienced, and
Mhm.
interestingly enough, there can be another explanation for it. But really, because it's
Mm.
my experience, the
Right.
only explanation that matters is mine.
Mm.
It's personal, So I, after being in China and coming back, the
Well,
questions just
yeah, I
became.
was sitting here on the edge of my seat waiting to ask, how did China change you?
It was being away from Christianity
Mhm.
because you can't do Christianity in China. You know,
Why not?
well, because the country is what's the word? It's not a democracy,
Mhm.
um, and so they don't embrace Christianity.
Mhm.
They are looking for people who are trying to start underground churches. Like they're looking at you to see if you're going to start an underground church. I
Mm.
got followed. My phones got tapped. My
Mm.
computers, internet, my email was tapped. They
Mm.
dug through my trash. So they're looking for to see if they already assume you're Christian because you come from a Western culture,
Mhm.
Western country. So that's a whole nother conversation
Mhm.
about how Christianity is cultural.
Yeah.
And so um, I couldn't, if I was going to be there and stay there in peace, I couldn't do what I did here as a Christian.
Mm.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't wear the t-shirts. I couldn't wear a collar. There was no place for me to park my car in special parking spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't. There was no first Sunday. There was no communion Sunday. It was no church membership.
Mm.
So now here's the thing. I learned being there that my identity was wrapped up in this religion, and without the religion, I did not know who I was.
Mm.
Without doing it, there is a there. We're
Mm.
so used to doing Christianity that when you don't have it to do, what do you do?
So it's sort of like what some people experienced during COVID, where they
Yes.
weren't doing the church things,
Yes.
and they still
Yes.
tried to find a way to do the Christian things, and maybe without the community around, maybe without the worship band around, maybe without the you kind of have to figure out like, okay, what is this again?
Right.
Yeah. Mm.
Right. And for me, it was just like I carried my Bible everywhere I went here in the States. So
Mhm.
much that my friends wrote a song about it. A full-fledged verse and chorus about me carrying my, and I couldn't do that there. It,
Mm.
that was a part of my identity
Mhm.
to the point that they wrote a song about it. And I couldn't
Mm.
do that there.
mm,
So now who am I without these things that gave me identity?
mhm,
Who am I without that?
mm.
And I had to figure that out.
Wow. Did
And
you share the gospel in China?
I did. I
Okay.
had 7 college students that came to my apartment
Mhm.
weekly in most cases, and we
In
read through the
secret.
book of Luke. Uh huh.
Okay. Mm,
And we read through the book of Luke for 2 years.
mm. Wow.
Yes. I took them through salvation. Um, uh, I gave them the book of Luke on MP3.
Mhm,
They were just
mm.
so blown away by that. Um, I, in essence, graduated them from
Was there any
a
fear
2 year
that
Bible study.
was there any fear that they might, like, be undercover, like, waiting us to dime you out or something, or
Well, sure. I think in the beginning there was. I guess
Mhm,
I was willing to risk that
mhm,
because they could be undercover in my classroom too.
mhm,
It just you could never tell.
mm,
Um, and so I just risked it because while I was there to be a missionary, that's what
mhm,
missionaries did.
mm. Okay.
I did. Go ahead. I'm gonna let you answer
Well,
first.
no. The I was just gonna try to get you to say more about, so you realize that without the customs of Christianity, you weren't sure what you weren't sure who you were without those customs.
Right.
Um, yeah.
It's I couldn't even teach my students the customs.
Wow. Wow.
So, and now, mind you, though, I didn't know these things. I didn't know I couldn't teach them the customs until I came back to the customs.
Mm.
I didn't know that I wasn't
What do you
teaching them.
mean? What do you mean? Say more about that.
So I came back to the States,
Mhm.
particularly after my first year, and was like, "Ooh, I didn't
Mm.
teach them about the devil. I didn't teach them communion.
Mm.
All of the things that
Mm.
we do here because we have we can do them because I don't even want to
Mhm.
say the freedom to do them. We just sometimes we doing stuff just because we can do it.
Mhm.
All of the things that we can do, it didn't occur to me that I wasn't teaching them that
Mm.
in this in while I was back in China. I
Mhm.
wasn't doing this stuff. And not only was I not teaching them, I wasn't doing it. So my first experience of culture shock was back here in the States.
Wow.
I didn't have culture shock going to China.
Mm.
Um, but coming back to the States and standing in church and
Mhm.
hearing the about the devil was like, oh, I hadn't heard.
Mm.
And mind you, now I lived in a building
Mhm.
full of Christians,
Mhm.
Western Christians. So it's not that we're
Mhm.
not talking about I
Mm.
lived amongst or with Chinese students.
Mhm.
I lived on a college campus, a
Mm.
university campus, and so in my building was mostly Westerners, and we a lot of us were there to love our students.
Mhm.
And if we did anything else, if we offered them Christ, if we that was a cherry on top.
Mhm.
But what we were there to do was love students,
Mm.
and I was just shocked
Wow.
that I hadn't even recalled the devil, that I hadn't taken. And here's the
Mm.
thing, and by that I mean I hadn't
Mm.
even thought about it. That was the shocker for me. Here it is. I was born into Christianity. My mama was taking communion with me in her belly.
Mm.
I'm telling you, it is that much culture that when my mother got pregnant,
Mhm.
she was tithing. So I go over there for a year and forget
Mhm.
all that I have done. Mind you, I was in my 30s.
Mm.
So we're not talking about, I didn't go over there at 18.
Yeah.
And I'm just 48 today.
Mm.
So I was in my 30s. I'd
Mhm.
been doing this when I was able to earn money. I was still living in my parents' house. You better tithe.
Mm.
I wore white on first Sunday like everybody else. And I took communion and I had to check to make sure I was right with God. I
Mm.
did all of the things. And I go away from for 1 year and don't even recall
Mm.
a first Sunday.
I'm over here geeking because I wrote a book called Navigating the N-Word, which deals with the use of the N-word.
Mhm.
And I talk about Richard Pryor's, he did a show on the Sunset Strip in LA. And he talked about when he came back from Africa. He went to Africa for 3 weeks. And he said he was getting ready to leave. And he said, I heard a voice. The voice said to me, he's not saying it's God, it's his inner voice. He said, the voice said to me, look around. What do you see?
Mm-hmm.
He said, I see all kinds of people, all colors of people doing all sorts of things. He says, the voice said to him, do you see any niggers? Richard Pryor is the one who made the, one of his famous records was That Nigger's Crazy, right?
Okay.
His whole career was based off of talking about how niggers be, how niggers act. He said, the voice said to him, do you see any niggers? He said, not only do I not see any niggers, he said, I hadn't even said the word in 3 weeks since I've been there. I hadn't heard it. I hadn't said it in 3 weeks. He said, the voice said to him, that's because there are none. And he said, it hit him like a ton of bricks. He said, that word only makes sense back in America. Here,
culture.
The word doesn't even make sense. And so when I heard you talk, I mean, you said the exact same things about a different piece of culture. In your American context. Oh, the devil's doing this. Oh, I got to do this on first service. Oh, I got to. You get to a different culture where that doesn't even come to consciousness.
No.
Yeah.
I literally know where I was standing in the room when he said, I'm telling you, I know who said it. When he said the devil in your life. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I haven't heard that in a year. I hadn't even sought to hear it. It just did not exist. And that cultural shock experience is what pushed me to go back and start asking questions. It's number one, is something wrong with me? Like,
now, when we talked a while ago, I don't think you shared this part. I don't think you shared this part of your deconstruction.
Okay.
This is very good. Like, this is.
That was it. That's what made me go back literally and read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I spent, so I went back to China for my second year. The college year started when it did. And then we had at that time, a 2.5-month vacation. That is our Christmas, our New Year, and then their New Year. And the first year I went to Hong Kong and did ministry in Hong Kong because I didn't know what else to do. So I did for that time. I kid you not, I went to a 24-hour prayer establishment and did my hours and then toured Hong Kong because again I just didn't know what else to do with my life. Right. And that's literally how I feel. If I could go back and do it again, I would see way more of the world, especially on the dime of the university. But so that was my first year. The second year, after experiencing that culture shock, I stayed in my apartment and I read the Bible from chapter to chapter as long as I could every single day. I would wake up. I would go get breakfast. I'd come back to my apartment. I would read as much as I could, go get dinner, come back, read as much as I could, go to bed. And I did it every day until I finished. And when I finished, I was angry.
What was the biggest revelation or biggest like aha moment during that time?
There's no biggest. It's just, I mean, there's so many impactful moments. One of the impactful moments I think that stays with me is after a while, I began to translate, if you will, my imagination, as much as I could, my physical imagination. If my imagination had a physical body, I would put myself in these stories to watch and see, not what I could see, but what wasn't there.
What do you mean?
There was I don't remember in which chapter, but there were just times that I would go to the story and see, this is it. This is what I mean. Because I guess I've never had to articulate. I would go and see what Christianity said was there, but wasn't. The whole communion idea, and going to the table.
Mhm.
I almost kind of describe myself as going to the table, sitting in front of the table with my legs crossed, folded, uh, trying to not to use but the other word, but just kind of crisscrossed and
Mhm.
just watching. And who wasn't there was Paul,
Mhm.
the one who has, you know, guided or created this thing called communion.
Mhm.
And it wasn't even called communion. Communion
Mhm.
wasn't even there. The
Mhm.
crackers, the blood, the white clothing, the women separated from the men, the gold
Mhm.
plates,
Mhm.
the silence, the you know what I
Mhm.
mean? The somber mood. It wasn't there.
Mhm.
So I was like, how did we get here?
Mhm.
How did we get to this place where kids couldn't be in the room except their parents had explained everything? How did we get to that place? I'm sitting
Right.
here going, I'm looking at this going, now, what is not there is what
Mhm.
we've been doing.
Now, at that
The
point, did you
verse,
separate your tradition from others, or were you just thinking Christianity at large had been
just
getting it
Chris,
wrong?
uh, I don't know if I thought at the time that they were getting it wrong, but it produced
Mm.
questions for me.
Okay,
What have we been doing?
gotcha.
How are we here? How
Mhm.
are we um in this place that looks to me like division?
Mhm.
Children can't be in the room. Uh um, you know, where I come from, the women had to wear white
Mhm.
and certain women wore white and certain women sat in certain places, and then the men had different robes on and costumes or whatever you want to call them, and only the men could hold the plates because in the black church, in the Pentecostal church, women can't do much, and just all of this division and
What denomination?
differences.
What denomination were you
Kojic,
practicing? Kojic. Okay.
Church of God in Christ.
Mhm.
um all of this, the different ways to make ourselves distinctive from each other.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at this story
Hmm.
written in the Bible, going, none of what we do is
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
They actually were sitting, as the verse reads, leveled together, laying almost. The
Mhm.
verse reads, I think in the original, but they were laying there, chilling, as the story
Reclining at
reads, and
table.
reclining, as the
Mhm.
narrative says. And it's just like, if this is where we get direction from, what is this? And Jesus is it's written of him to have said, "Go and prepare for the feast of unleavened bread," not communion. Where did this come from? And it came
Mhm.
from someone who as Christianity would teach it, wasn't there.
Mhm.
He had a vision. Well, that's personal.
Mhm.
And he had to interpret this supposed vision.
Mhm.
I wasn't there. None of us was there. And we're
Right.
doing this, and
Mhm.
so it was I was going to these places as I
Mhm.
was reading. They were coming alive for me.
Mhm.
Not to say that it was real, but the
Gotcha.
words in and of itself, the
Mhm.
words were creating a picture for me. And there were things that were in the picture that
Mhm.
Christianity was not doing or was doing that wasn't in the picture.
Mhm. Okay.
That was really impactful for me.
Gotcha. So okay, you put the magnifying glass on. It seems like at this point you're just putting the magnifying glass on definitely your tradition. At what point does it go from, if you were even able to separate the two in your mind,
Hmm.
the tradition of Kojic to putting a magnifying glass on Christianity as a whole?
That's a great question. I I don't know how they can be separated at all, because
Mm,
it's all borrowed from the as far as I know, from the Catholic Church.
mm,
This all, as far as I know, I haven't studied, that far,
mm,
but a lot of what, and still, like, and the black church in and of itself is still today borrowing from the Catholic Church.
mm,
Now they're wearing hoods and they're holding the staffs and
mm,
all of the things, the priest and ugh. Um,
Because what if
it's
somebody was to come along and say, "Oh no, Chandrika, your problem was just with the
the
traditions in a particular church. There are other churches where you wouldn't be wearing white and the kids wouldn't be separated during
right.
communion and all that. Like maybe your issue was just with that expression of Christianity."
But it's still an expression of Christianity.
Hmm.
It's still a it still represents what Christianity, if you will, means to the black church.
Hmm.
You know, how the black church interprets Christianity.
Hmm.
Um, and nonetheless, though, you know, my parents called what they did for us, what they took us through, how they raised us, they called it Christianity.
Hmm.
So, um, I don't know if they would call it something else.
Hmm.
It's um, it's guided by Christians' Bible,
Hmm.
Christianity's authority.
Hmm.
You know, the word Christian is we find it in the book.
Right.
And I converted to,
Hmm.
or I shouldn't even use that word because that's not true. But I accepted
Hmm.
as when I became aware Christianity, or that I would, I guess I should say, walk it out or walk it through,
Hmm.
as my parents introduced it to us.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
But could not somebody come to you and say, it's just that version of it? There are other versions of it that you experienced, you might not have walked
decided
away
that.
from. Yeah, you might not have. De-
I mean, they can say that, but
Mhm.
what do you want me to do? Reverse, reverse, reverse. You know, I'm not gonna go and
Mhm.
experience other expressions of Christianity to decide if that's what I want to do or
Mm.
not.
Why
I'm
not?
not going because I don't want to. Because because I don't want to, because I think that anybody, every uh I think every religion
Mhm.
started with a question.
Mhm.
And no matter what expression of Christianity um, there is, I think there's always room or questions can be found.
True.
No, no, I mean, and that goes for Christianity, that goes for Judaism, Hinduism, all of them.
Mhm.
I believe every one of them started with, I wonder if, or is this, or will this, or why this.
Mhm.
It all started with a question. Even Pentecostalism probably started with a question, with C.H. Mason asking a question, and
Mhm.
whoever else, William Seymour, and all those guys, they had a question about what Pentecostalism or Black church was teaching them. They didn't agree, so they created Pentecostalism. They
Mhm.
created the Kojic Church, or then the Apostolic Church, or it all starts with, I got a question. And so why am I going somewhere else where somebody else have a question?
Okay.
You
So
know
the
what I mean?
question, yeah, yeah.
When your religion can be there, there's some reason to have to ask a question, and most likely you can't answer it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Most likely I ask questions that can nobody answer.
Um, can you give us one of your? Because I know there are people right now saying, "Oh, that's her issue. Maybe she doesn't know the Bible answers this or that question that she has." Like, what's if you can't name it, it's fine. But like, what's one of the questions that you would feel like if they could answer this, then maybe you would give them a second look? Because I want to get to your book in a minute, but this
Yes,
conversation is going in a good direction.
yes. I think I could offer a few, but I don't know if the Bible could answer this
Hmm.
question. I ask a question. Why ask for more? Um, it's about the system of church. It's
Hmm.
about the constant going to church, being a part of church, always asking for more of God, more
Hmm.
of Erica Campbell, I need just a little more Jesus. You know, um, I need more and more and more Jesus, more of you. And but the constant need for more of Jesus. The question I had was, no, we don't see that in the Bible.
Mhm.
All the people who had contact with Jesus, you don't see repetitive visits.
Mhm.
The woman at the well, who unfortunately doesn't have a name, or has a name, but we don't know it that I
Mhm.
know of, who had this run in with Jesus, or the blind man who could now see and wanted to follow Jesus, and Jesus tells him to go home to your friends and your family. So many people who had opportunities to hang out with Jesus, who had these impactful experiences, but we never see them constantly revisiting and asking Jesus for more.
Mhm.
Just where did we get that from? Even
Mhm.
when he talked to the woman at the well, he said, "The water I give
Mhm.
is eternal," which would mean there's no
Right.
need to ask for more.
Right. You won't need to keep coming back to the well. But are you answering your own question? And it seems like what you're basically saying is, but there is a version of Jesus and Jesus' story and the Bible where if we could just do that, the version where we don't need more, you may not have a problem with what Christianity could be if it was just a little more biblical.
I don't know if I'm saying that I have a problem with Christianity more than I'm
Mhm.
saying I have questions about what it has
Gotcha.
taught us.
Okay.
You know, Uh, you know how I offer this. Christianity didn't hurt me,
Mhm.
but it did hinder me. Um, that it is the introduction to the idea of something greater than me.
Mhm.
Whether you believe in that or not, that's your business.
Mhm.
But there is an idea that there's something bigger than me. And
Mhm.
thank God we live in a world where we get to entertain these ideas. We get to
Mhm.
give our energy of belief or believing to the idea of
Mhm.
something greater than me.
Mhm.
Christianity gave me that. Now, what Christianity taught me about the idea of something greater than me existing, I
Mhm.
have questions about.
Okay.
And so, you know, I'm revisiting some of what Christianity taught me about this idea of God.
Hmm. Okay. So the idea of God, of something greater than you, still appeals to you very much.
Yes, I'm still a woman of prayer.
Mhm.
Still, yes.
Prayer to the God of the Bible or prayer to just something greater than you?
Okay, so let's go. Let's talk about the God of the Bible.
Mhm.
Because I don't think the Bible is. The Bible isn't a person.
Mhm.
I write about um the fact that Bible doesn't speak. You hear all the time the Bible says,
Mhm.
that's due to some for some it's due to just being lazy. Number
Mhm.
two, but it gives so much personality. It's so much
Mhm.
breath to this thing that doesn't breathe. It has no pulse. It does not speak.
Well, if
Let me
someone says,
finish.
go ahead.
Let me finish. Let me just answer let me answer the
Mhm.
first question.
Mhm.
So having said that, I was it I kind of formed this ability to read the book um according to who is thought to have wrote it. I'm
Mhm.
not saying, that all of that is true. But if it is true, if it could be, it cannot be true, but we can still use our imagination
Mhm.
to think that it is, just to play around with it. So
Mhm.
if Moses is a real person, and it's largely attributed to Moses to have written the Bible. I mean, to have written Genesis, um, uh,
The Pentateuch.
Leviticus,
Mm.
Deuteronomy, Numbers. If it was attributed to him to write it, then I'm reading Moses's book. And then whatever is attributed to David, I'm reading David's book. And whatever's
Mhm.
attributed to Matthew, I'm reading Matthew's book or John's book. These are people.
Mhm.
People. These are people. I don't know them, so I don't know if they existed. but let's imagine that they are. And so if these are our people, then I might not be worshiping the God of Moses.
Mm.
but
Well,
but I like how John sees God in essence. That's just an example.
right.
Um, I might not be worshiping the God of David, especially David. Who the story goes that God killed his child,
Mm.
decided to spare David, who's the one that sinned, as Nathan says. Nathan says, and David admits to sinning. Nathan
Mm-hmm.
says, God is gonna, God is
Mm-hmm.
gonna
The child's going to
do
die
away with
because of
your
this.
sin,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll kill the child who is
Mm-hmm.
alive. It's not a fetus. It's not in the womb of the mother.
Mm-hmm.
This child is alive, and the child is stricken with an illness and killed. I don't know if I want to worship his God.
Okay.
But John may see God differently. Paul may see God differently. I think that the Bible does is not a contradiction. I think that if we either way, if we see it as real or if we see it as uh, from a imaginary standpoint of view, that people get to be different. People get to imagine differently. They get to interpret life differently.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be a whole. That
So
these
have
are
you
different
removed?
people with different experiences who interpreted their experiences differently from each other.
I get that. So I appreciate that explanation. I guess the question that remains is, I want to come back to something you said a minute ago, but first I want to get clarity on, do you remove the possibility of, I would think the answer is no, but I'd rather hear your take,
Mhm.
of God speaking through the way he's presented in the Bible? Is it just Moses speaking and David speaking and John speaking about their God, or is God behind them speaking about himself through their words?
Nobody can tell us that. Nobody
Okay.
could tell us that, but because the experience of God or the idea is so personal.
Mm,
So nobody can tell. So
mm,
all I could do is have my own experience. That's all I could do. I can have my own experience. And if I decide,
mm,
I say this all the time, if I'm having my own experience of God, and I'm also then reading
mm,
and run into an experience that sounds like something I've had,
mm,
great. But if I don't, great. That's the other thing about evolving out of Christianity. I don't
mm,
want my experience of this idea of God to be limited to Christianity's idea.
mm.
I want to explore the idea more. Is there more to God? Is there more to the idea of God than what y'all have said to me?
So it sounds like you're not ruling out the possibility of God speaking through the Bible. You're just not limiting yourself to that.
I'm ruling out God speaking through the Bible. I am
Oh, okay.
ruling that out. What
Oh,
I
okay.
am not ruling out is that God speaking to people or
Hmm.
people believing they are hearing God. If I just wasn't there.
Hmm.
Moses wasn't there in the beginning. And so
Hmm.
that for me, he is, it's attributed to him to have written about the beginning.
Hmm.
Since I know he wasn't there, that gives me now the opportunity to ask questions about how all of this started.
Hmm.
What he wrote is what he wrote, if he wrote it.
Hmm.
But that doesn't alleviate or eliminate my curiosity about how all this started.
Hmm.
How am I here? Why am I here? And it still hasn't eliminated it. Christians want to act like it has,
Hmm.
but we somewhere in our cars at stoplights going, what is all of this for?
Hmm.
you know, but we don't want to talk about that. We just want to say, well, Moses wrote, or Genesis says, or the
Hmm.
Bible say. We won't even say the book no more. We just say the Bible say.
Hmm.
But, understanding that the exploration of life is personal, and the interpretation of said exploration and experience, it's personal.
Hmm.
It's personal. So if you are finding more freedom and more health and wealth and not believing that there's something greater than you, that is so personal.
Hmm.
I stop short of that. However, I'm between that and what Christianity taught me. I'm asking
Hmm.
questions about all of what y'all said.
Okay.
but I
Okay.
understand how you got to where you got because I'm asking questions too,
Hmm. So
you know?
this was all a segue off of, or maybe a digression off
Hmm.
of when you said you're still a woman of prayer. I was
Yes.
try to hone in on prayer to whom, and
Yes.
by saying the God of the Bible, I meant, like the scripture says, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And you're saying,
Hmm.
by saying you're a woman of prayer, you could be talking to the God of either, any, or maybe none of them. You haven't
Uh,
narrowed it down.
I haven't narrowed it. It's no, it's a matter of, let me say it this way. Lord help me.
Was that a prayer or a complaint? No, I'm playing.
Well, right. If it's a personal relationship,
Hmm.
then it's the God of Chandrika.
Okay. Hmm.
You
I
know,
know there's somebody right now who's typing, "I like that." They're going to use that now. Go
it's
ahead.
isn't that what Christianity is selling?
Hmm.
They don't mean it, but aren't that's what they're selling? A personal
Well,
relationship with God. But they don't mean that though. They don't mean it.
but Christianity is selling a personal relationship with a God who unifies all the stories of the Moseses, the Davids, the Johns. So Christianity is not going to allow anyone to bifurcate and say it's only the God of this one or that one, or the God of Chanjika. It's got to be the God of history, the God who's been telling this story
Hmm.
from Genesis.
Hmm.
It's all one narrative. And so you're going to have to harmonize what David says and what,
Hmm.
you know, so the God of
And
Chandrika. Yeah, go ahead.
that's I think that's ridiculous because
Hmm,
it's impossible to harmonize it. That's why people say the Bible is contradictory. No,
hmm,
it isn't. It's just that different people are having different experiences, interpreting life differently,
hmm,
interpreting those experiences differently. It's not. It's and I used to say the same thing. It's my experience of life and
hmm,
how I interpret life. Calling it godly, calling it spiritual,
hmm.
calling it human is all personal. It's all up to me to interpret.
So I probably should have warned you before, but I guess you already got that. I think I did tell you I would push back a little bit on some of your
Go ahead.
ideas. If I wanted to adopt a similar approach in that understanding of things, is it possible that the God of Chandrika would not be the God of Brady? Or is it just the same God, just different interpretations of that same God? And I'm going back to the idea about Moses versus
Hmm.
David versus John. Is it,
Hmm.
are you talking to the same God, just experiencing that God or interpreting that God differently, or different gods?
Nobody. I wonder if nobody can answer that, but God.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Who can
Gotcha.
answer that?
Hmm.
Who can answer that? Jesus said, you worship a God that you've never seen, but can't love who you do see." You know.
John said that.
Oh, I thought that Jesus did. John say Jesus said it?
That's in, I think, First John, or one of the epistles of John.
Are you sure?
Yeah. That's loving your brother whom you've not seen,
Okay.
not
Okay.
hating your brother that you've not seen, but loving
Yes.
God who,
Yes.
hating your
Who
brother that you have seen, but loving God that you have
beloved?
not seen.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's unfortunate that we have to have
Hmm.
we've got to have all of this together.
Hmm.
Nobody is on the journey of figuring it out. I saw Tasha Page Lockhart today do an interview with somebody, and she said, "We're," and I don't know if you know, Tasha Page
Nope.
is a gospel artist, um, legendary
Hmm.
family. Her dad is commissioned. Her mom is
Oh, wow.
witness.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh, Lisa Page is her mom. Her dad
Hmm.
played and sang for with commission, and
Hmm.
so you know, or her mom's husband played commission, um, and she said we're trying to figure this out,
Hmm.
and uh, it's unfortunate that we have to have it figured out.
Hmm.
We, we have to have it figured out, and we gotta. we have to capture it in a book and say, this is just what it is.
Mhm.
You know, how would Paul be interpreting all of what he's experiencing today if he lived today?
Mhm.
Would it be the same?
Hmm.
Would his letters be written the same? Um, so his conversion didn't land him into the absolute. We don't see the questions, but what
Mhm.
if some of the I asked this in the book, what if some a third of what we read are results of questions?
Mhm.
Surely he had them. We don't see them. We all we see is the resolve, which is one of the reasons I wrote the book the way I did. I just wrote out, these are my questions. I have a degree in biblical studies. I am ordained. I have tons of ministry experience. I've been a missionary in China and this and that and the other, and I still have questions.
But see, Paul is not putting his writings on the level of yours. Paul is saying, like when you talked about communion, right? He says,
Hmm.
I delivered to you what I received from the Lord. Like, this
Right.
is not a question. Somebody up there revealed this to me. When he talks about marriage, whether or not you should get married, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
He says, oh, it's better to not marry. And then when he goes, he says, I don't have a command from the Lord on this, but he says, but I too think I have the Spirit of God. He's putting himself on the level of, this is not just Paul talking. And I guess that's why I asked the question of, can the God of Chandrika be the God of all these people? Because what do you do in a world of 8 billion people if everyone has their own personal experience of God, and then those personal experiences conflict? Well, God told me I should vote this way. God told me we should be voting that way. And so one of
And,
the problems, yeah, go
and
ahead.
that's what's happening. That's what's happening.
Well, see, that's why
Uh,
to me, though, and I'm not trying to put this on you. This is
you're
not my
good.
interview. This is about you. But
Hmm.
one of the issues for me about the whole concept of God is I find it not almost impossible to believe that
Hmm.
an all wise, all knowing, all powerful
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
would leave us in this kind of a
Hmm.
conundrum about what this God has to say about life.
Hmm.
That to me says one of two things. Either God has not revealed himself,
Hmm.
or God is the wrong idea about what's at the base of our reality.
Hmm.
Because other than that, you do have this 8 billion different experiences of the thing we're calling God.
Hmm.
But
And
that's where I am.
that's so understandable. That's
Mm,
nothing to knock. I understand how you got to where you are.
mm,
At one point, I wouldn't have. I have just stopped short of.
mhm,
I can exist believing or thinking that we all might be experiencing a God, just like
mhm,
we're experiencing life.
mhm.
We're all experiencing life that we know for sure,
Yeah.
but have sometimes different interpretations of said life.
Mhm,
And so it could be possible to experience the same restaurant and
mhm,
have different perspectives of the experience. It's quite possible to be
mhm,
experiencing spirituality or
mhm,
experiencing God or divinity
mhm,
and be articulating said experiences differently. It's
mhm,
just like it's not it's it you know I agree with or look to. I think it's fun to entertain that all things are possible to those who believe. I'm not saying that as scripture.
mhm,
I have the experience of belief
mhm,
and experiencing what I have come to believe, good, bad, and indifferent. It's like,
mhm,
oh, I need to change that thought.
mhm,
And so, you know, it just like it's possible to go to a fair and so many people go and experience it but have different perspectives or different articulation of said experience.
mhm,
um I'm not saying that God exists. I'm not saying that God does exist, and I ain't saying that God don't either.
mhm,
um I understand. I do believe that there is room for
mhm.
question, that that it is not so absolute as religion would have us believe, any of them, that there is not room for questions.
So I'm going to sum up what I think you're saying in the title of your book. You correct me, amen me, or in any other way, sum it up better than I could because it's your book. Lord, I don't want to die a Christian seems like what you're saying is, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with this limited God in a box understanding of spirituality.
Yes.
Let me get out of that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. What
And
else would you like?
if
Wrap up the book for us.
if if I evolve to where you are, okay.
Hmm.
But I understand where you are, and I have still not stopped asking questions.
Hmm.
Still, if Jesus is God, then why did he need to grow in understanding or grow
Hmm.
in knowledge and in the favor
Hmm.
of God? Like what
Hmm.
Jesus, you know what I mean? So I have, as I go along and I continue to be privy to what Christianity is teaching, I'm still asking questions, and I
Hmm.
may land where you are, but I challenge myself. I challenge my beliefs by putting myself in the way of Christian conversation every now and
Hmm.
then. I challenge myself, my beliefs by putting my way in uh, myself in the way of the kinds of conversations you are having.
Hmm.
I'm listening too on both sides, going, yeah, but I've
Hmm.
had this experience, or
Hmm.
asking questions of that experience. Um,
Hmm.
and to me, that is the greatest expression. I have found authenticity to be
Hmm.
uh, the greatest expression of spirituality for me.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
that has I have been a worship leader. I have been I love people.
Hmm.
I believe in this divine love, if you will,
Hmm.
and I've not experienced a greater freedom than
Hmm.
that of authenticity.
Hmm.
And so if
Wow.
authenticity just means I'm not participating in that because I have a question that I've not come to a resolve, but I have a
Hmm.
question about it and I choose to not participate because I got a question, that
Hmm.
is the greatest expression of spirituality to me.
Yeah.
The being authentic. And I
Hmm.
think the other thing for me is if it keeps me from loving people
Hmm.
despite the difference, then I don't want it. And
Okay.
one thing I know for sure
Hmm.
is in my experience, Christianity keeps me from loving
Hmm.
people
Now, I
no
was
matter
going to go
what.
back to the statement I was holding off on earlier about love, but before I go there, you just made me want to put a magnifying glass on that. How does Christianity keep you from loving people? Matter of fact, let me tie it in then. Let me tie it into
Hmm.
the thing I was going to say earlier, because you mentioned love being sort of your barometer for
Hmm.
truth.
Hmm.
Is that a good way to say it? Love being your barometer for truth,
Love being my barometer for choice
for choice.
in in how I will
Hmm.
deal with or handle society as it
Hmm.
continues to evolve around me.
Right.
How do I see that? How do I treat a person who is making a decision that is different from mine
Hmm.
according to love?
Hmm.
That is my measurement, not according
Okay.
to what Christianity teaches me.
Hmm.
But how do I love people despite the difference? Despite the difference, whatever that difference is.
Yeah.
How do I love a person who is aborting a baby?
Hmm.
How do I love a person who is trans? How do I love a person who is homosexual? How do I love a person who is alcoholic? How do I love a person who's cheated on their spouse?
What
How
if
do I,
someone
how
says, but Christianity doesn't teach you to not love them? You're supposed to hate the sin, but love the sinner.
they where they find that at?
Uh,
If it look if this is your guide, then where you find that at?
well, God tells us, not God, John, right? Tells us that for God so loved the world, but then it tells us to uh, that we are not to love the world. So there's this idea of, okay, if God loved the world, I'm supposed to be like God, but then we're not supposed to love the world. What is it about the world that I can love? Oh, the people. What is it about the world that I can't love? The sin.
Oh,
So
the
there are
people.
ways, there are ways you can get there. There are ways you can get there. Um,
Okay.
what if someone says to you, okay, if love is your barometer for choice,
Mhm.
the greatest act of love is found in the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. For a good man, people won't hardly die, but God showed his love for us in this, that while we were yet sinners, Christ
Okay.
died for us. That's
Hmm.
the greatest display of love Are you sure you don't want to include that in your worldview of spirituality? You're not going to get a greater love than that.
I have questions about salvation.
Mm-hmm.
For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. Why? To save the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was for salvation. So, I have questions about salvation, the necessity for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do I need salvation to love people? Did I ever?
Hmm.
Before Jesus is recorded to have died, he said, love God, love people, and love yourself. So we had the ability before Jesus, supposedly,
Hmm.
before Jesus died, the ability to love people was already there.
Hmm.
According to Jesus's, what is written of him to have said.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this is the Christian's authority. Jesus is recorded to have said,
Hmm.
love God, love people. So we always had the ability, according to this narrative,
Hmm.
to love people.
Hmm.
This is before blood was shed,
Mm-hmm.
before heads were dropped, before
Hmm.
sides were stabbed.
Hmm.
So, did I ever need
Hmm.
salvation to just love people?
Hmm.
Did I ever need that?
Gotcha.
You know,
Yeah.
um, and that's the question. Did
Mm-hmm.
I ever need that? Did I ever? If and I have to be fair and say I have a question about salvation. Period. Aside from
Mm-hmm.
that, but
Yeah.
did I need that to love people?
Yeah. Good answer. Good answer. Um, for the Christian, the cross is the pinnacle. You're saying, Lord, don't let me
No, that's
max
not what I
out.
said. I said, Lord, I don't want to.
Lord, I don't want to. Lord, I don't want to max out at what the Bible or the Christians are saying is the pinnacle. You want to continue to evolve
Yes.
beyond that.
Yeah, I think the idea of God, or God itself
Mm-hmm.
is bigger, than, um, what Christians or any
Mm-hmm.
religion, um, and if whether you believe that or not is your business. If
Mm-hmm.
my experience of life is going to be according to, if you will, my perspective or my beliefs. So if
Mm-hmm.
I choose to believe God is bigger than these religions, then I'm going to experience that which I believe,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So I choose to believe God is bigger than all of y'all. So I don't want any religion to limit
Mm.
my experience of God and people.
Interesting. Lord, I don't want to die religious.
Lord, I don't want to die a Christian. I believe Christianity to be a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't
I
know
only,
if
I only said it that way because you said you believe God is bigger than
by,
religions.
by religion, I mean
Mm-hmm.
Christianity, Hinduism,
Mm-hmm.
Muslims,
Mm-hmm.
what's the guy's name now? They are, the guys that are Old Testament,
Hebrew
happy.
Israelites.
Yes, all of that, all of it. So nobody had to be afraid that I was going to go somewhere else. My sister opened the book by saying, I told my sister the name of the book, and she said, "Well, what do you want to die as? Chandrika?"
That would have been a great question for me to ask. Yeah, if not a Christian, then
That's
what?
what
But
do
you
you
said
want to
just
die as?
yeah.
Just me,
Mm,
just me. I want, it to be said of me that I tried at least
mhm.
to love people. If it keeps me from loving people, then I don't want it.
I'm trying to
And
wrap this
I
up, but
don't. Go
you keep bringing up
ahead.
things
I'm
that
not
make
in
me
a
want to.
hurry.
Well, yeah, I got so you talked about what you don't want to die as, what you do want to die as, but then that brings up another question. What did you do with your views of the afterlife, heaven, hell?
Great. So
Once you
such great question.
well, so you I was going to try to wrap it up, but you so
I said
since you're evolving past Christianity, what do you do with those concepts now?
leave them at concepts because
Okay.
they aren't realities for me.
Mhm.
Um, as we talked earlier about this message called the reality of hell.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been. And
Mm-hmm.
there are people who will preach that as a reality more than they will preach the
But you
good that
don't,
is a
you've
reality.
never been, but you don't want to go. Why not make Pascal's wager and bet on Jesus because he claims to be able to save from that? Why risk it?
You know, I don't know if I'm changing the subject by answering that, but I think the only way I can answer that question is just
Mm.
by what it triggered. Because
Mm-hmm.
I asked the same question in a different way.
Okay.
Um, the chapter called "A God Like This."
Mm.
Why have children? Why be Christian? Believing in hell and bring children into this world. Why would you do that? You knowing and
Mm.
understanding that this is a world of free choice and free will.
Mm.
Why would you do that?
Mm.
And so I have the same question,
Mm.
but it's a question
Mm-hmm.
versus an absolute. I
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen after this. What I have right is what I
Mm.
got right now.
Gotcha.
It's the experience of breath. I have the
Mm-hmm.
experience of blinking. I have the
Mm.
experience of sleeping.
Mm.
All I can talk about is what I know to be my experience.
Mm.
Anybody who said they went to hell, or anybody who said they went, or
Mm.
anybody who wrote about it had not been yet.
Well, we got books. I remember the book, A Divine Revelation of Hell, where the woman talks about having gone to
I
hell
know.
and
And,
seen,
and so then my question to her was what was it like to be there for an eternity?
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
What was it like to be in heaven for an eternity?
Hmm.
Did you know what I mean? I
Hmm.
asked the question of John.
Hmm.
Now John the Revelator. Now
Hmm.
that you've passed, I write that to him. Now that
Hmm.
you've passed, did you get confirmation of some of the things you wrote? And I
Hmm.
spelled that out.
Hmm.
Did you get confirmation? Because when I was growing up in church, prophecy, which Revelation is supposed to be a book of prophecy,
Hmm.
prophecy had to be confirmed.
Hmm.
But we selling it though.
Hmm.
The book of Revelation. But what about prophecy needing to be concerned? So if Revelation is the prophecy, then I need to ask John, did you get confirmation before I start preaching
Hmm.
it? Before I say anything, did you get confirmation when you went on to glory?
Hmm. Wow.
So anybody who was on this side, the things that we are preaching and teaching about life after death,
Hmm.
anybody who wrote about it had not died yet.
uh, the old Christian me would say, Jesus did die and he came back
And he
talking.
didn't write it, but he didn't write. I said anybody who wrote, Jesus don't
Yeah.
have no book with his name on it.
Hmm.
Now y'all let me know if there's a book with Jesus' name on it, that he
Hmm.
authored a book, because that's a whole nother conversation.
Hmm.
But there's nothing that Jesus wrote. And if he did, what would he have written?
Hmm.
Does
Yeah.
his perspective and articulation of his experience, does it matter coming from him to anybody? Does it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It does to me.
Hmm.
So since he didn't write about it, then I got questions.
Hmm. Would you say you've definitely have deconverted, even though you're not in the space where I'm at? You would say you've deconverted, right? Or just deconstructed?
I don't know if I could say I've anything.
Okay.
I've just freed. I have definitely freed myself or
Hmm.
given myself permission to ask questions of this thing. I don't know if I
Hmm.
want anything about my spiritual life to be defined by anything. Don't define it by anything. Leave
I
that space
respect that
alone.
so much, but I think the Christian would have a leg to stand on. Once you, I hear you saying you're questioning, but once you stop
Asking questions,
accepting,
asking questions.
but once you
That's a
stop
difference.
accepting certain answers, that's a D something. Like when you say God's not speaking through the Bible, that's a D
Mm-mm.
something as the Christian, as far as Christians go, as far as Christianity goes.
I mean, I guess I'm just don't want to. I guess I'm thinking of it as a whole movement, and I don't want to be limited by that either.
I got you.
Limited or defined. It's a whole. I do know it as a whole movement, and maybe that's what I'm thinking about. It is
Hmm.
a movement, and
Hmm.
it's a movement that I can appreciate. I
Hmm.
just still don't want any
Yeah.
of my spiritual life or exploration of said
Hmm.
um, um, idea to be limited by either or.
You don't want boxes. I get you. I
No,
get you.
that's just another box.
Yep. I got you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's I have to go think about that now because I don't see it as a box.
Hmm.
I see it as me going into the freedom. Like I have the full freedom now to accept whatever the truth may be because I'm not in. So when I think of deconversion, I think of it as stepping out of all boxes. Um,
Oh, see, I think of deconversion as taking back the moment that you converted. You know what I mean?
right.
Going back to
There's that for
revisit
sure.
that and making the decision that that was never necessary.
Yeah, there's that for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I think of deconversion. And to me, that's not necessarily a movement. More than
Mhm.
right now, what is a movement is deconstructing.
True. True.
That is a movement. And
Right.
so to me, there's a difference in my opinion, definition, and experience and work. Like and I thought it was powerful when you said that. I never heard it before. To deconvert,
Mm.
it is to go back and undo
Hmm.
the conversion and
Mm.
the reasons and uproot all of it. Versus to deconstruct would be to really again. I think it is to ask questions, but also you can't ask in deconstructing. You can't ask questions without the resolve.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I have a resolve for every question I've
Hmm.
asked. I just know that eh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got a question about that. And
Yeah.
so my goal is not to deconstruct. My goal
Mm.
is to be authentic.
Gotcha.
Is to
Gotcha.
be true about be true and honest about what I don't know.
Hmm.
That I am indulging in, I am giving energy to, I
Hmm.
am praying about,
Yeah.
meditating about this idea of a spiritual life
Mm.
that introduces me to a better
Yeah.
me, a greater humanity,
Hmm.
uh, et cetera, et cetera. I know that's what I'm doing
Gotcha.
is pressing into that. It's not I've read every scripture in this book and I still don't
Mm.
have all the answers to all my questions.
Hmm.
So it's not that black and white. And I'm
Yeah.
done with acting like it's that black and white. That I'm finished with.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, hmm, I was going to ask if you had any A questions for me or
Yes.
B words of wisdom since you were on a similar road, though not the same road, long before
Hmm.
I was.
Hmm.
But a while ago, you gave me some words of wisdom that I haven't yet taken to heart. And I think this conversation helped me understand why. One of the things that you challenged me with was when you saw me getting into these scuffles on my Facebook page,
Hmm.
you told me to remember that there were others who've gone before me. You
Hmm.
mentioned people like Carlton Pearson and,
Yes.
just that there are others already on this road and
Yes.
to just sort of honor just some of the D
Yes.
something that's happened before I got on
the
this track.
the revisitations of.
There, but see, the reason why that didn't really, I wasn't quick to say, oh yeah, let me, kind of get on the coattails of the movement that's already, because when I see people like Carlton Pearson, and even when I hear you and tell your story as dope as it is, I feel like that's a different struggle than where I'm at. Like not even struggle, it's a different journey. Even though I think we're all journeying,
Hmm.
I'm at a point where I look at the journey and I say, I think we were on the wrong road.
Hmm.
I don't just think we took a wrong turn. I think we were on
Hmm.
the wrong road.
Hmm.
And so I don't know if that makes complete sense, but I just see it as if I was still trying to keep my spirituality intact, then I would throw my hat in with those who are on more of that line. To me, I
Gotcha.
see spirituality as a ancient, outmoded, like a hypothesis that didn't pan out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I have a hard time. Like, I respect the journey, but I look at it like, I wonder if our roads are ever going to intersect as we meander, because I think we are all journeying.
Mm-hmm.
Even the
Mm-hmm.
Christian is journeying.
Yes,
Um,
even if they don't admit it.
right. But I just
Mm-hmm.
think spirituality is I don't see myself setting foot on that path.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was like, I wish I could, but
And
you
I
know what I
and I
mean?
understand that. I understand that. I wasn't reading it that way at the time,
Mm,
because I if surely you have. I've evolved even since some of the things I've written.
mm,
So surely you have, as you even continue to have these conversations,
yeah.
whether they be private or public or
Hmm.
with other people, that even some of your thoughts have evolved, and you have better been able to better articulate them.
This is true.
Um, so at the time I said that, the comments or the things that I was reading
Mm.
seemed to be still kind of, you know, uh,
Open.
um, not necessarily open, but still growing. Like they were
Mm.
um, amateur, or
Hmm.
they had not fully
Yeah.
matured yet,
Yeah.
and you were talking as though you were introducing it. I was like, now hold on.
Okay.
now
Okay. I got
now
you.
look,
I got you.
your words said that. I was like, he acted like this is new. So, because for me, it was
Mm,
important to me, even though Carlton and I didn't land in the same place, it was
mhm,
important to me that he knew that people like me, like
mhm,
you, were continuing to have this conversation. Not to say that I was going back to tell him about you,
mm,
but I guess that stood out to me.
mm,
Like, there are people before us, and I feel like they need to know that,
mm,
because of the isolation,
mm,
especially because of all that he lost,
mm.
that the conversation has continued to the next generation.
Yeah,
Um, and
that's
we
good.
landed in different places. He
Hmm.
and I landed in different places. There's still, particularly according to his book, he has probably evolved now, but
Mm,
according to one of his books, I had landed somewhere different from him.
mm,
Um, I still think Carlton still believes that Jesus came to save the whole world.
mm,
And I'm asking, well, what did we need salvation for? Did we
mm,
ever need it?
mm.
So he doesn't have that question.
Gotcha.
I think he still doesn't have that question. However, um, I think uh, I love the word meandering,
Mm.
at least, on the same highway, different lanes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
So
once again, you making me. All right.
go, stop explaining
So,
that. Go ahead.
in your book, then, because what you just said, did we ever need salvation? What do we need salvation from? Does your book address what I think many Christians will say when they hear you say that? What do you do about sin?
Treat it as an idea again, as an
Hmm.
idea. I just kind of play around with my imagination with that. What
Hmm.
if by the time, because come on, y'all, we do, I hope we all do know that, you know Moses didn't have a pencil and paper and wasn't writing real time. Matter of fact, Moses again was not there when the first, as the story goes, when the first time the word sin is even used, he wasn't
Mm,
even alive.
mm,
So the first time we see the word sin in the Old Testament is between Cain and Abel.
mhm,
Moses wasn't even, he just, I mean, just not even thought of. Can I
mm.
say that? Can I say that?
Well,
You know what I mean? And I'm just saying, according to the narrative,
mm,
Moses was not even thought of. And so that gives me room and space to ask questions of what he wrote.
mm,
So I just, often I would play
gotcha.
in my imagination with the thought of, maybe, Moses was somewhere sitting under a tree one day and just thought, God, what is all of this? What is all this murdering and
Mm,
killing, and you know what I mean? What did all this come from?
mm,
And so what if, he had this idea, or the idea was passed down to him about this tree, and how we were born and brought into the world pure, and somehow we messed it up.
Hmm.
The point is there's room to play with the story, or my imagination, engage my imagination,
Hmm.
because the person who was writing the story was not there.
Right.
He was not
Yeah.
in the story as it went. And so, so what is sin? It's a,
Yeah.
it's an idea. It's a labeling um something, but it's
Hmm.
labeling something he wasn't even there for.
Hmm. I have a similar uh, reaction to when I begin to realize, okay, the Bible can't be telling us literal history. The second you introduce, well, then maybe it's figurative, then I can go a bunch of different places with it. And
Hmm.
so the same way you say, well, if he wasn't there, then I can, well, if this is not
Yes,
literal, then I can.
I can.
And
Yes.
once I begin to pull that thread, that's what leads me to where I eventually
There
end
you
up.
go. That's
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying there's so much room for question. I
Mm,
go to the garden as
mm,
I am being pulled in. I
mhm,
go to the garden, or I go to the beginning, and I'm watching. You have to see everything, and including the person who's writing it.
hmm,
That person, if it's
hmm,
Christianity attributes the book of Genesis to Moses, he is not present.
hmm,
So
hmm.
somebody could say, just like Paul, well, God gave it to him in a vision. Well,
Yep.
I wasn't there. A vision is internal. Don't
Hmm.
have you ever had one? Haven't you ever had a
Hmm.
dream? No, but I had the realest dream last night, to
Hmm.
me. And
Hmm.
I'm not joking. I moved
Hmm.
to a new house and forgot to put the sale sign in my old house. What kind of dream was that? I woke up at my
Hmm.
new house and thought, oh, wait a minute, I gotta sell the realest dream ever.
Hmm.
But nobody knows how real it was but me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so it's not tangible to you. And then I'm going to use it. I'm going to use my
Hmm.
personal
Hmm.
experience of my dream to now convert
Hmm.
humanity
Hmm.
to
Well,
scare, to
yeah.
scare, to provide anxiety, to control. That's I'm
Here's where our roads, like I said, they'll intersect. I
mhm,
have those similar thoughts because I'm saying, okay, you mean to tell me that this book, these books in this book from these authors that we know not who,
right,
we don't know who wrote Genesis. We don't know
right,
any of this.
right.
And this is what I'm supposed to stake my life on. Like this is what
Yes.
I think I could, I think I should be. I offer this to the watcher. I think we could and should be forgiven for not being willing to trust this. If
Mm,
you feel like you have to take this as, think about the process through which this story comes to us.
mm-hmm,
Think about the gritty, the messiness, the uncertainties, and I'm supposed to take this and call this the word of God.
mm-hmm,
I think we could be forgiven for not being willing to trust this process. And a God who would leave its revelation to this kind of process and then demand our allegiance upon the pain of eternal death and
mm-hmm,
hell,
mm-hmm,
that is the most unjust thing I can imagine.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I don't know how I could worship such a God.
mm-hmm.
But I think the viewer, you need to just consider these things, why someone could have a problem with this kind of a process.
I I became an author.
Mm,
And again, remember, I said this earlier. I love the idea of having experiences, and whether you mention that to someone else and they go, "I had the same experience." I called my nephew today and said I saw this, and he was like, "I just saw the same thing." Or whether you read it in a book, in an article, something. However,
mm,
you become privy to information about what you've experienced, social media, where you have something to compare it to. This kind of makes me think of it.
mm,
I wrote a book. I became an author. I went through the process of writing, editing, publishing, the whole nine.
mm,
And it wasn't until then that I decided to research
mm,
who gets the royalties for this book
Mm.
because
Mm.
now I am writing a book and now I'm making a royalty
Right.
agreement
Mm.
only to find out
Mm.
it's the royal family.
Mm.
Not for this one in particular, but for the most sold Bible in the world, the
Mhm.
King James version of of
Mm.
is if there are royalties received, it's for them
Mm.
because I don't know if they're received, but they have their name is on the transcript, on
Mm.
the manuscript.
Right.
Their names are, and so so then I was led to ask this question.
Mm.
You mean to tell me that these people, if there's a check to be gotten,
Mhm.
they are getting it? Do they believe that
Mm.
this is the word of God? And I pretty much can answer that question.
Yeah, good stuff.
Is this an authority in their lives?
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
Their name is on it, and do they believe?
Mm.
But we let me get started because see,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt a little cussing spirit. I felt it. But we don't have any questions. Let me say it that way. But you don't
Mm.
have no questions.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Throw your questions in the chat. I'm sure anybody who's watching this, if you've been checking out this long, what questions might you have? I definitely slide back through the chat to answer questions here and there. Would love to hear the things that were said in this video. How did they hit you? What did it cause you to think about? What questions you might have? Chandrika, I appreciate your time and your authenticity. Um, just the realness to ask the questions and not allow anyone, um, anyone to box you into conversion or deconversion, right? But just to have those authentic conversations and
Yes.
ask those questions. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.